Welcome to The Alignment Show, featuring conversations with folks who have taken steps to identify their highest values and align their lives around them. Time on this earth is not unlimited, and you may be seeking to make sure you spend your time on things that matter to you. These conversations will encourage you and support you in doing so. Now, let's meet this week's guest on The Alignment Show. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, the universe. Glad you're with us once again here on the Alignment Show. We have a great conversation lined up for you here today. But as we're getting started, I just want to remind you that this show is sponsored by a couple of folks. Let's get our buttons going over here. One of those people is SalesWise Live. They've got another one coming up here. We've talked about SalesWise before. Let's move that over to the side. There we go. Okay, SalesWise Live. We've talked about them because one of the things that I appreciate about them so much, Bob Berg, Kim Angeli, Jeff West, if you are one of those folks who thinks of sales as being kind of sleazy, backing people into a corner, taking advantage of people, that is absolutely not what these guys are about. I don't know that they're experts, and so they know the traditional sales approach, but they base their approach on building genuine relationships, long-term relationships, which you can't do if you're taking advantage of people. And so if you are involved in any kind of activity where you need to influence people, it's not just commission sales. I mean, ministry, nonprofits, whatever it might be. This is a worthwhile thing. Now, one of the uh, advantages right now is that January 29th is their next one, and it's going to be virtual. That means you don't have to get on a plane. You don't have to travel anywhere. You don't have to worry about what the weather's going to be like. So this is something for you to check out. Also want to acknowledge our other sponsor, which is me, in a sense, the books that I have written so far. There's a couple of them in the Sparklight Chronicles. In fact, those of you who are with us virtually, you will see the QR code to where you can find out more about that. We'll have links for all of these in the show notes. So those of you who are on with us audio only, you'll be able to get to those. You can find out about SalesWise Live by going to donking.com. That's DONN, donking.com/saleswise. You can find out about my books by going to donking.com/books. And we have a brand new short story available right now for free. It's called Writing Home. It's in the same universe, no pun intended, because this one does have a science fiction story supporting the nonfiction learning, called Writing Home. And there's the QR code. I think the short link is donking.com/writing home. Might be Writing Home free. I'll double check and get it in the show notes, but we'll verify that for sure. And so all of these are things that are designed to help you to live your values and value your life. And I have no idea who is calling me from someplace in Texas right now. Yes, the joys of live broadcasting. Anyhow, speaking of live, I did record this particular interview. And in fact, it was recorded back in July. Things have been so crazy around here. But we carry on. Let me look at my buttons over here just a minute, folks. Hold on. Okay. Not anything I need to worry about there. Anyway, recorded this back in July, and I'm very glad to have with us Lizbeth Meredith. Let me tell you a bit about Lizbeth. Turn over here. I told you a little bit about it, those of you who are subscribed. And by the way, if you're not subscribed, be sure that you are following us. You can go to confidencecultivators.com and be sure that you find out about upcoming guests. But I met Lizbeth through a writers group, and Lizbeth is a true survivor and inspiration. She's a multi award winning author, professional speaker, college instructor. Her memoir inspired the TV movie Stolen by Their Father. There's a fascinating story there. Lizbeth uses storytelling to help others deal with trauma and build resilience. Now, she spent 30 years working in Alaska's justice system, where she worked with both survivors and offenders. Now she is the host of the Persistence U podcast. That's you with the letter U. I found out she lives an hour and a half from me here in East Tennessee, so that was another connection that we had. So I think you're going to benefit from this conversation, and because we recorded back in July, I connected with her recently to get an update. I do have an update that I will share with you after the recording, but for now, at this point, let's just get into the interview and learn about Lizbeth Meredith. I'll turn it over to my recorded self. Don, let's get right into talking with Lizbeth. So after that introduction, I'm not 100% sure what I said in the introduction, Lizbeth, because we're recording this at two different times. But, one of the things I want to mention up front that I'm still wrapping my head around that you only live an hour and a half drive away from me. I still think of you as being in Alaska.
Right. So do I half the time.
Yeah. That's where you spend a lot of your life, right?
Right. More than 50 years in Alaska.
Oh, wow. So Alaska is a place I've always wanted to go, but of course, that's not primarily why we've got you on here today. As we've talked about, I'm sure that I got in the introduction about you being an author and a podcaster. One of the things I wanted to show here, if it's okay, I've heard 2 or 3 times that your story has been made into a Lifetime movie, and I actually went and found the site about that. Let me see if I can pull this up. Oh yeah, let's share this here. So this is the movie that was made about a really intense part of your life.
Yes.
And so one of the things I don't know about you, I know you have done a lot of work in the intervening years, working with victims and that sort of thing. Which came first? I mean, did this happen to you and then it led you into working with trauma survivors, or were you already doing that?
It's such a good question. I was already working in the field of domestic abuse survivors as an advocate, but that was informed by my experience of both my childhood and my marriage. And so I felt like I was in a place of like, wow, I found my purpose. This horrible pain was not going to be left in vain. And I only thought of myself as a survivor. I didn't think of myself as a victim at that point. And so it was years into working with domestic abuse survivors that my children were kidnapped 4 years after I left their father. So 4 years, you'd think it would be like 4 days or 4 months, but 4 long years after I left. And 2 years into my survivor advocacy, my kids were taken out of country.
Wow. I mean, I can't imagine the situation there. And I think I don't have that book pulled up. We'll get it in the show notes. In fact, I'll put a link in the show notes to the Lifetime movie. But you wrote a book about that experience, I believe. What is the name of that book?
My memoir is called Pieces of Me, Rescuing My Kidnapped Daughters.
Okay. And again, folks, we'll be sure to have a link to that in our show notes. Was that your first book, or had you written before? Okay.
It was my first full-length book. I had written a miniature guide before that I published and then unpublished and been in an anthology, but this was my first full-length book.
Okay. Now, this is not primarily a show about writers, of course, but we have a lot of writers who come on here just by virtue of the fact, I think, of being a writer, you spend time thinking about your values and
Right.
what's important to you. So, you know, probably off the top of your head, statistics about um, kidnappings and abuse and just all sorts of things because of the work that you do. How common is it for a non-custodial spouse to take children like that?
Well, and here's the thing that my event happened so long ago. So some of the statistics have changed,
Mm.
but we have in our country, as an example, thousands and thousands, like many thousands of cases of children taken by one parent from another. Sometimes it's an act of spite because they don't want the other parent to have the child. Sometimes, and I would say in the minority of cases, but it does happen where a parent is trying to protect their child but doesn't know what services could help them to
Mhm.
keep their child safe. But it does happen many, many thousands of times a year. It's less common for a child to be taken from one parent and then that parent flees the country and back. Yeah, that's really hard. When my children were taken, more than half the parents whose kids left the country never saw them again.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, and I know you detail it in the what country was it that he fled to?
The beautiful country of Greece, which
Of
was
Greece.
his birth country. He was a citizen when I met him already of America, but he was born in and has, I think, dual citizenship in Greece.
Okay. And with that dual citizenship, it made it a lot easier to change countries, so to speak.
True.
Well, again, we're going to point people to the book where they can learn details about how you got them back, but it was a 2-year fight, I think. And as you
Yes.
say, if in half the cases, you never see the kids.
That's right. It was a 2-year struggle. I certainly couldn't do it alone because I didn't have family in my corner at that time. And I didn't have I was in my 20s. I had the money that most 20 something year olds have, which is to say nothing.
Yeah.
And it was a $100,000 problem, but I made about $10 an hour. So
Wow.
I certainly wasn't able to achieve this alone. And I was very fortunate to meet people who were willing to get involved, even in Greece. Some
Mm.
amazing friends I made in the process. But I would say that the fight it's kind of one that never ended because when I got home, that's when the heavy lifting began. If
Mm.
it seemed difficult to bring children out of a foreign country, it was nothing compared to trying to raise very traumatized children with very little resources and not knowing as much as I should have about the world of trauma really impeded my ability to parent them. So it changed their lives forever. There was no sort of like, boop, this is over, happily ever after. It really hit them hard. But I'm so fortunate to have them back.
Oh, indeed. I can only imagine the complexity of it. Just a quick question: how old were they at the time?
The epitome of adorability in children. They were 4 and 6 years old.
Okay, and so when we're talking about 2 years, we're talking about a third, at least half of their lifetime.
Right.
Too young to really know what's going on. So, yeah, I can see what you mean when you say the hard part really began after you got them back.
It's so true. And I think sometimes people who mean well will offer opinions. So to my children, there were people who would say, aren't you lucky it was your father who did it? And
Mm.
actually, children need to feel like both parents are advocating for their well being, not this from a parent. So it was a really hard thing to come back from. It was very scary for them.
Yeah, yeah, I can just only imagine. I have two questions that are competing to get out at the same time. Both of them are origin questions. Now, a good interviewer knows to ask only one question at a time, but I'm going to break that rule and put them both out there because they may tie in together. One question is, since you were working with survivors before this happened to you, what led you into that work in the first place? Okay, that's question one. And question two, we've already established that this sort of thing generally happens to thousands of people. They don't all write a book about it. So I'm curious about what led you to write a book about the experience.
Good questions. And the first one, let's go back to for just a second, because I am about to have a big birthday and my memory's already gone.
Ah,
But what led me into, I know, what led me into working with survivors, it's not a quick answer, but I will say one very important thing that happened when I was in college as a single mom. And my parents were both high school dropouts. So I was like first generation college student doing a tremendously bad job at it in my undergraduate degree. It was shocking that I finished, to be honest with you, but but I took a class, and it was literature of Appalachian women. In that class, we studied a woman, Maria. I can't remember her last name now that I'm talking about it. She was on my podcast recently, but it was a young woman, not much older than myself, who in Lexington, Kentucky, she was a writer, and she decided in the early 1990s that she would hold the system accountable of people who were overlooking domestic abuse survivors, people who, police officers, judges, whatever, that ignored the pleas of getting help. She wrote about them, published their pictures. She was bold and brazen and won an amazing award for her work, a Pulitzer Award-winning author now. And so she is so amazing. She's an instructor now in North Carolina. But I just remember thinking, wow, a person could make a difference just changing the system. If you don't like what's happening to you, you can matter and you can respond differently. So I graduated from college. I had two options. One was to be a pharmaceutical sales rep, and that looked very likely. And it looked like that would be the path to an easy single mom life with money in the bank.
mhm.
Naturally, I chose poverty. And that's just kind of how I've worked. So I chose something that meant so much to me and became a domestic abuse survivor advocate. And I loved it. And even though I didn't make much money, I got to do trainings with and for police officers and judges and public assistance workers and lawyers, helping people understand how someone could get and find themselves in an abusive relationship and what they would need to be a productive member and safe member of society again. So I adored it. When did I know I would write a book, or why did I? Well, I always loved story since I was a child. I have loved story, wrote tragic poetry as a kid, and my first degree was in journalism. And
Ah,
so my bachelor's degree was in journalism. I've always admired the idea of writing books. I was a kidnapped child from Kentucky to Alaska, grew up with my name changed and didn't know many of my siblings or my father. When it dawned on me that history was simply repeating itself, and I had, in a sense, allowed that because, I chose who I chose without doing any of the work a person could do before, when they get out of a traumatic childhood and before they make very grown-up decisions. I just grabbed the first hand that reached out to me. And that was something that has continued to pay not just my daughters and myself, but people who love us in dividends. It was awful. It was a terrible, terrible marriage, but it made for something that people could understand. Time does not heal all wounds. Good intentions cannot overcome intergenerational trauma for long. And there is a lot of hope in healing and a lot of opportunities to find healing, including writing.
Mhm. There's so much here, Elizabeth. We've connected before, but we're still getting to know each other. And I knew that your children had been kidnapped. This is the first that I'm hearing that you experienced it from the other side of that as a kidnapped child. You've written about that, probably.
Yes, it's in the book, but I don't elaborate too much. It's just, it is an important piece because I knew when my kids were taken how, having a sense of identity, even now and deep in my 50s on the eve of my 60th birthday, it's still an issue. I didn't know a big part of my family, and I never fit in anywhere terribly well afterward. And I knew how devastating that was. And so for me, they had not to live their whole lives in hiding and live like that.
Yeah. Okay, and I'm not going to probe too much here. And this is not 60 minutes. So, if I start
Right.
getting into something we don't want to talk about, steer it somewhere else. But two more questions that come to mind. One is, when did you realize that you had been kidnapped? I mean, yeah, I'm maybe it was immediate, maybe it took a while. And here I am with a second question again. Both for you and for your children, has it, after all these years, is there still a sense of just any minute I could be, I don't know, snatched is not quite the right word, but everything could be turned upside down at a moment's notice? Does it increase that anxiety? I guess
Right.
that's one of the questions here.
Well, let me go back to the first question. I
Yeah.
was a little girl when I realized it didn't feel like Alaska was my home. I didn't feel like in a family of light blonde haired children, the kids that I grew up with, my siblings that I grew up with who had a different father, and I had near black hair and dark eyes and skin that darkened quite easily. It felt very different. I was highly suspicious something was up as early as I can remember. When I got older, my mother started encouraging me. She came clean about a few details, although they weren't necessarily all truthful ones. Some of them were, though. But she
Mhm.
talked about the circumstances of which, by which I had a biological father that I'd not met, who was much older, and that I should look out for him and try to get to know him. But what she said, of course, as I was getting older, was this had been a man that tried to kill her, tried to kill me, was dangerous around children. And I already grew up in a lot of chaos. I thought, why would I look that up?
Yeah.
I mean, what would be the fun? So I didn't think much of it. When she gave me advice, I loved her, but I had to really, really measure the truthfulness. And sometimes I underestimated her truthfulness because years later, when I found my father through an attorney, he did confirm some of her details.
Mhm.
And then I felt really bad that I had discounted her. So I was an older kid when I would say I was 20 when it all hit that, oh, this was a hardcore,
Mhm.
kidnapping.
Yeah.
What happened was I later learned my siblings and the girls in the family, there were 6 of us, but there were 2 boys and 4 girls. And the girls were told they were going for women's time, time with just our mom. And the boys could stay home with their father. And then we never came back. We headed
Mm.
off to, I think, first Louisiana, where she'd met someone else. And then they headed up to Alaska, where at the time, I mean, Alaska is beautiful, but a lot of people went because they were fleeing legal troubles.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's when I learned. And then what was the second question, please?
Uh, the second question, if I can remember it myself here. Um, if that experience has, and I remember the question, I'm going to phrase it
Yes.
a little differently here. I think a lot of kids, when they are little, they will wonder, was I adopted? Is this my real family? And so, like in your case, it turned out, yeah, there was something different. In other words, the
Right.
suspicions were confirmed. Most humans deal with a certain level of anxiety, of not being in control, of things being unpredictable. I'm curious as to whether the experience you had and the experience your kids had increases that anxiety, or in a weird way it might free it up, that you were able to survive whatever was thrown at you, because I know one of your themes these days is resilience.
Right.
And that's the context for this question. Does it increase the anxiety, or does it increase your sense of, that was weird stuff and I handled it?
And I would say to that question, both. I think both of those answers are true. I feel like my daughters have much more anxiety about attachment and am I safe? And will everyone be okay? We check in a dysfunctional amount sometimes with one another, even today. My children returned to the United States in 1996. In May 24th of 1996. That's a long time ago. We've all gone through a lot of therapy, a lot of different kind of healing exercises and trauma releasing exercises. we've done really well, all things considered. And yet there is still stuff, old
Mhm.
scar tissue that we manage, and it shows up in how what the anxiety level is of somebody. Is someone hurt in the family? Did you hear from such and such? Mom, you haven't returned my text. You've been, where are you? Where are you? My oldest daughter just came to visit here in Chattanooga recently from Alaska. And she has always been convinced in the last many years, I'm just going to die in my sleep.
Mm.
And it was a difficult decision to move out of Alaska, but I definitely wanted to try somewhere different and get to know my Southern family better. But it really worries her. So she recorded my voice and she asked a whole bunch of questions about her childhood and about my childhood and things, because she just didn't, when I die in my sleep, she doesn't want to not have my voice. And
Yeah.
it's so sweet, but it's also can be debilitating.
Mm.
So we still seek help for those kinds of things when it's too much. I think for me, I've let go of a lot. I've had to, kind of release some of that, but it shows up again. I think
Yeah.
healing is a lifelong journey. It's not like I went to 10 counseling sessions and I'm done. It is lifelong.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense. I'm picking up on something else that you said earlier and that you just said about getting to know your Southern family. At the time that you were in college in Alaska, what drew you to study about the Appalachian culture? Because you said something about that earlier. Did you already know about that Southern family at that point?
I did know about the Southern family, and I had at that point met the family, but then we sort of lost touch because of the chaos that happened when I left my former husband. And so but I definitely wanted so much to know family and to know my roots. And I used to romanticize who I would have been had I been raised with a whole family.
Mm.
And the truth of the matter is that was just a childhood that was not real. I am
Right.
not sorry for who I am, and things turned out as they turned out. I wouldn't wish some of it on other people, but I am happy with the way things turned.
Hmm.
But getting to know them really helped me feel a sense of wholeness, and it has. And I'm very close to some of my family, just like I'd been there all along, and some not as much because it's
Yeah.
a big, big, messy family, but delightful and colorful. And I'm so fortunate to have had the chance to meet them.
Very good. Very good. And so that's what brought you from Alaska to Chattanooga.
Right.
Uh,
Part of what, yes, it's
I-
art.
I'll make a kind of a side comment. I think most people, a lot of folks should come on this show. We'll talk about, I can't help but wonder what if XYZ had happened differently.
Right.
And most of us recognize, as you just expressed, that's fantasy. There's no way to know that things might not have turned out a whole lot worse.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it is what it is. Well, we want to make sure that folks know about some of the stuff that you're doing now. You have a podcast, and I think you're kind of updating it a bit. Am I right about that? Or
Yes, in the last few months, I'm updating it. I've become a member of the Podnuga network, but I'm trying very hard now to learn how to make a YouTube channel that has a theme. So I had my YouTube channel. I've thrown up some of my video podcasts, but I'm working on that, looking to increase my numbers. And I have to update my website to have the new links as you and I spoke of. And I'm so glad that I got to have you as my guest recently on Persistency with Lizbeth as well. I'm so thankful.
and it was fun to be on there. I was glad to do so. So by the time this episode airs, you'll have things pointing the way you want them to from your website. So we want to have that website here in this show. So those of you who are on with us visually, we've got the website on the ticker down at the bottom, lameredith.com. And there's a bunch of different things there that you'll be able to follow the links for. And if you're on visually, you can take advantage of QR codes. So you can just point your camera at this QR code and be able to go to Elizabeth's website. But again, for those of you who are on with us audio only, it's LA, like Los Angeles, LA Meredith, MEREDITH.com. And Lizbeth is updating that right now. So there'll be all kinds of good stuff on there. There's good stuff there now, but it'll be up to date when you get to it. And how many books have you written at this point, Lizbeth?
Full length books, uh, 3 with 2 published, 1 to come, and then another one that's nearly finished. That's on writing ethic. That's on working with crime survivors ethically.
Mm-hmm. So
So
there's
yes,
a lot of writing that has gone on, that continues to go on. We've got a QR code here for the latest one that is published. This is Grounded in Grit. Turn Your Challenges into Superpowers. That is just an intriguing title. Great cover, by the way.
thank you.
And so those of you who are on with us visually, we've got the QR code up there. We will have the link in the show notes. So remember, you can always get show notes by going to confidencecultivators.com. And I'm not sure what episode number this will be once we go to our new format. But you'll be able to find it at confidencecultivators.com and follow the link to this book. And we'll have Lizbeth's other books on there as well. And the upcoming book, you mentioned it just a moment ago, is the working title. Has it been set as this will be the title?
I am pretty 90% sure Tilka Faces the Odds. One Man at a Time is going to be the title. It's a novel. It's fun. It's sort of like Bridget Jones meets Elizabeth Gilbert in Eat, Pray, Love. And there is a phrase that women use in Alaska where there was a rumor that there were so many more men than women. Yeah, the odds are good, but the goods are odd. And so, so it kind of goes along those lines. That's where the title came from.
Oh my, okay. I love that. I am so looking forward to that coming out. In fact, do you have a publication date yet? Do you have some idea when?
I do not. We are in the final edits, so I think I will do this time a pre-launch time.
Mhm.
And if anyone wants to hop onto the newsletter, they're going to know this is not. I worked with the publisher my first book. Finalizing the details of one's own launch without that help is a little more challenging, I've learned, but it's okay. So I have the final beta reader reading it now, and I'm really excited. I'm not a fast writer. So I wanted to publish something more enjoyable. And I'm not more enjoyable. I mean, definitely more lighthearted. I love my first book. Definitely. The second book is more pointed for survivors who are going through crises. This, I just wanted to be fun and enjoyable. But because I'm a slow writer, what we consider to be funny has changed over the last 10 years. So I had to go back and think, what was I thinking? And just kind of redo some parts, and you know how you do with editing.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so looking forward to that. We'll try to get you back on the show when that is out. We'll help you with the launch on that. So,
I'd love that. Thank you.
in any case, and I'm sure that if you keep lameredith.com bookmarked, that you will be able to see that. In fact, I think when you start to go away from that website, you get the little pop-up that says join my newsletter. So I would encourage people to get on that newsletter so you can keep up with that.
Thank you.
Well, Lizbeth, it has been a great conversation. I love having people to come on and talk about their experience and what has changed their life. You've had so many life-changing experiences. And you work now with your podcast and your publications to help people manage those kind of changes. You're working especially with resilience, which is much needed in our culture now.
Thank you.
So I always like to wrap up by saying there's probably something that you wish that I had asked about that I didn't. If so, what would that be, and what would your answer be?
Gosh, Dawn, that's such a good question. If someone asked, is it easy to do these different things and to make these changes and learn podcasting and all the tech, I would say no. But I would say people like yourself have been so incredibly helpful. So I really appreciate you as a confidence cultivator being able to, in just a few moments, say, hey, try this or whatever. If I've asked for feedback and you've given great feedback. I think for all of us, we tell ourselves, I can't do this or I can't do that. But with the right support, there's just about nothing we can't do if it matters enough.
I love that. So there's nothing we can't do if it matters enough. That's a great refinement to something that I've heard before. And I'm always going to remember the odds are good, but the goods are odd. You've given me some new phrases here today. Oh my. Well, I'm going to turn it over to my virtual self for the outro. We'll look forward to your next book coming out. And for the books that are out there already, I'm adding to my reading list. So thank you very much, Lizbeth.
I thank you so much, Don. This was a joy.
Wow, what a conversation that was, folks. So I'm very glad to have not only had Lizbeth on with us, but to have caught up a little bit with her since then. We talked a bit about Tilka Faces the Odds. And that book is now out, as a matter of fact. Those of you who are on with us visually, I'm putting the QR code up there for that. Once again, it's a different kind of cover, which it should be given the different genre. You know, that's a whole science in of itself, matching the cover to the genre. And I'm looking forward to reading this one. And we will put the link in the show notes for those of you who don't do QR codes, and especially for those of you who are on here with us audio only. So just a little bit of an update. As we said, the book Tilka Faces the Odds released widely. It's going to be in audiobook form, I believe. She said it'll be out in audiobook in February. And we are planning on bringing Lizbeth back on again. We've made arrangements for a recording session, and so we'll get her on in February. She also said that an essay of hers is in a book released by Word and Deed Publishing. The title of that one, and we'll get a link to that. I don't have a QR code for it right now, but that book is Goodbye for Now: True Stories of Life, Love, and Loss. And so this reminds me to observe a little bit as we're getting ready to wrap up our show this week. You listen to a story like Lizbeth's and you think, well, you know, I don't know anybody to whom that has happened. Her details vary, but one of the things that she works with people on, and that I would emphasize for all of us following this show, you learn from people like Lizbeth and others who have been on here about resilience, about it just amazes me the things that people can face and can deal with. My experience has been in talking with people that folks will say, I just don't know if I could handle XYZ, whatever it might be. And we don't wish for you to have to. But over the years, I have seen that all of us at some point face something that makes you say, how is it that you're not curled up on the floor in a fetal position? And we manage. We manage. You also have that resilience. And so as you face your challenges, it is my hope that here on the Alignment Show that we can have conversations with guests. We can occasionally just have me on, or a solo episode from somebody that will encourage you in living your values so you can value your life. I think Lizbeth has done that for me. Even though she just lives an hour and a half away, we still have not connected in person, but I'm hoping in the next month or so we'll be able to make that connection. So in any case, I hope, as I said, that this is an encouragement to you. And as you go out there and live your life, that you will be able to live your values so you can value your life. Not quite sure what's coming up next week on the Alignment Show. I believe we will have the episode with Joanna Penn. I'm looking forward to that. She's been on here before, and we're lucky to have another conversation with her. We have several lined up, though, and so stay tuned here to the Alignment Show for good conversations aimed at, as we've said a few times, helping you to live your values, to value your life. We'll see you next time on The Alignment Show. That's it for this week's episode of The Alignment Show. What has it inspired you to do in your own life? Whatever it is, take action now and take the first step. It will help you to talk with a friend about what you're thinking. Share confidencecultivators.com to spread the goodness.
and remember to live your values and value your life. We will see you next week on The Alignment Show.